Oh, well, something up in there.
So Aaron, we're putting your cat from like 6:30 to 8, right?
Got it. There it is. Okay. So we have the plebiscites. These are
Like parasites.
these are resolutions, ladies and gentlemen. Let's focus. These are resolutions that were passed that only applied to the plebeians. So this was only lower class law that was passed. And they were given the privilege of doing that, but they were not allowed originally to write laws for the upper class. And so while the Roman government said, sure, you can have some power, but we're not going to give you power over everybody. We're going to give you power over just the little people.
That's not fair.
Well, that's...
So did the upper class still get to make laws for the lower class?
Yes.
That's dumb.
Yes, they got to make laws for the other class. Yes.
What drew the line there upper class and lower class?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What drew the line upper class and lower class?
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer to that.
I think it's eye color.
As far as there was a listen, I need your extra comments to stop when I'm talking. Obviously, there was an upper class versus lower class. Exactly where that middle ground is, I don't know. It's kind of like in the United States, we have an upper class, we have a middle class, we have a lower class. Well, it's really hard to define what's the difference between somebody in the upper and the middle class. It's hard to define difference between middle class and lower class. So we don't necessarily put a number value on that as far as your net worth. I'm not sure the Romans did either. If any of you find out or see something on that, let me know, because as far as I know, I've never investigated that and don't have a good answer for you. Generally, people could recognize you, but I'm sure they had to have something as far as who was allowed to be part of that group and who those laws applied to. But you need to understand that the plebiscites were those resolutions only applied to plebeians and not patricians. They had within their council a tribune. And this was an office of 10 elected men. And they were given the privilege to protect the rights of the common people. And here's how they were allowed to do that. They were allowed to veto laws passed by the patricians. Now, we need to back up and make sure we understand, what does veto mean? Okay, it means to say no. Okay? If we translate it, it actually translates to I forbid. And so they gave them a certain number of vetoes that they were allowed to use when they did not like the laws passed down from the patrician class. The plebeians could vote and they could say, no, we don't accept that. We veto that. Well, we borrowed that in the United States, and the president has the veto power. And sometimes we'll use that when he doesn't like certain laws.
How many vetoes do they get?
I don't know a number, and I don't know if it was a specific number, or if it was if you start doing too many, we're going to take it away, and they kind of threaten that way. But I've not heard a specific number on that. But it wasn't unlimited. You couldn't just veto everything.
Right, so I don't know why I'm thinking like conspiracy a lot today, but like couldn't then the patricians just say, like, give out a bunch of dumb laws and then they veto it to the point where they say, no, you don't have that rule anymore, and then they pass a law that they...
Yes, they could have done that, but part of the balance of power in a republic like this is that you're going to look out for the best interest of the people. The plebeian class outnumbered the patrician class.
So would the assemblies just say no then?
So yeah, they could, but the plebeians knew that, the patricians knew that if they did not work with the lower class and keep them happy, then if they revolted, there was going to be total chaos. So there was some give and take, and that's part of how this type of government works. Kevin?
So I looked up on Wikipedia what the status between the two were.
Okay.
And it said it was established by ancestry, your
Okay.
rank on the census, which was based off wealth and political privilege, and attainment of honors.
Good. Okay, so it kind of
It's like a
seems,
mix of those things.
yeah. So you're kind of born into it, but then when they take the census too. Yep. What else?
Okay, so in the military, was it just the patricians, or was it like both plebeians and patricians?
Yeah, both served in the military. Yeah.
So then it'd be like, so then if there was a revolt, then the plebeians would still have a way to defend themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So and then, okay.
Yeah, but the lower class was in greater numbers than the upper class, and
Right.
so that would cause some major problems there. In 287, 287, the plebeians are allowed to pass laws that apply to all of Rome. And so it's at this point here where the patricians do give even more power to the lower class, and they're allowed to pass laws for everybody. Julie?
How were they able to pass laws? Like, does that mean they could vote or suggest laws?
So that means within the council, the plebeian council here, they could come up with a law that said that we have to eat donuts Friday mornings,
That would be great.
and the sophomore class is going to provide it for me.
So they could just pick.
They could make any law they wanted to, and
Even though they're lower.
right. So let's put it in this context. Let's just say that Mr. Grass chose all of us within this classroom to set the laws for the school, set the rules for the school. If we put together and put them all together, one of our laws was that sophomores only have to come to school on Wednesdays. And that was one of your laws that you passed. Well, Chance, what is your view on that rule?
I wouldn't like it.
Why not?
I didn't have to go to school every day.
You'd have to go to school every day, and you being one of the upperclassmen would say, wait, why did they get to do that and I don't? And we have a very large junior class and a pretty decent sized senior class. And if they looked at you as sophomores and they said, wait a second, that's not a rule that we think is very good, it may cause a great deal of complaining and stress within the student body. So you're not going to pass that rule. Now, you might pass a rule that says all high school only has to come on Wednesdays, and that way applies to everybody, and then you might make everyone happy. Now, so my point is that within the government here, you have to make decisions that are going to be wise for everybody and not specific to the social class. So we're seeing the progress of Rome's government moving toward a more unified government where it's not divided as much by social class, which is ultimately what we want to get to here in the United States, is a government that is not divided by social class. And that's why when we threw out the Articles of Confederation and we adopted the Constitution, we had a House of Representatives and we have a Senate. Okay, and I don't have time to go into all those right now. We'll have that discussion in government, probably with Mr. Johns in U.S. history. But what we need to understand is that we're now crossing the social barriers where that everybody is becoming more equal in Rome. That's the big idea here. In 450, and by the way, I should have mentioned this the other day, I will tell you when you need to know specific dates. Most of the time when I put them up here, they are going to be giving you a perspective. And the reason I put these two up here, 287 and 450, is to see that there's a pretty good time gap between. You do not have to know either of those dates. If there's a date I want you to memorize, I will tell you specifically. You will not miss it. I will make sure that you know I got to memorize that date. Otherwise, these are giving you timeline perspectives so that you know how much time's been going on here. So the Roman Forum in 450, this is where we put Roman laws into writing for the very first time.
They was verbal before that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how are you supposed to know? Because then, like, say whoever is supposed to keep record of it could just basically make up anything they want.
Right.
They have a photo.
Right. So that's why
Okay.
most of history up to this point, the laws were not written. The exception would be the Code of Hammurabi. And I realize that's more ancient history. We didn't get into that at the beginning of this year. but he was really the first one to come up with a written law. The Israelites also had a written law from the book of Moses. But as far as more modern history, Rome adopted this here. Now, if you're a king, do you want a written law? No. Why not, Gavin?
Because you have unlimited power without a written law.
Exactly. You can change the law anytime you want. You can decide that you want to make a new rule, and they could say, well, that's against the laws that we had before. Well, I changed them. Or, yeah, show me. Or, no, I didn't say that. You can change your mind right there.
It's kind of unfair to the citizens, though, because you don't really
Oh,
know
yeah.
what the laws are.
Oh, yeah. But you're the king. You want what's best for you.
Yeah, man.
So this is a big change here. When you actually have a written law, that means that the government officials have to abide by that law as well. So Roman form was extremely important. And then we have the Law of 12 Tables. And this becomes the foundation for Roman civil law. So I didn't really have a good place to throw this in there, so that's why I just wanted to make sure that you understood that they began to transition from a verbal law to a written law. And their case law and their judicial system provides a foundation for a lot of our judicial system today. I don't want to spend a lot of time here in the Mediterranean, but I think it's worth noting that the Mediterranean was critical to the success of Rome. Why do you think the Mediterranean was so important? Thinking geographically here, you can see my map. Here's Rome, here's the Mediterranean. Chance, what do you think?
Well, like Rome was kind of like all around it, so it was like an easy travel. It was a lot faster than walking.
Yeah. So you put your stuff, whatever it is you're transporting, on a ship, you can move it a lot quicker. What else would this provide as an advantage for you, Haley? Trade. Yeah, we can get to. They did a lot of trading here with North Africa, a lot of trading over here to the Far East. What else? Okay, so if you're going to get an invader coming from the south, they've got to cross the Mediterranean. So you've got that border and a little bit of safe zone. And so that's exactly what's going to happen. As they expand their territory, they move south. There is a character here that I want you to meet. His name is Pyrrhus. Yes. Have any of you ever heard the phrase Pyrrhic victory? Okay. Just thought I'd throw that out there. That is a saying that's common. Apparently not too common because you've never heard of it. So Pyrrhus was a Greek leader. He was a distant relative of Alexander the Great, and he is trying to attack southern Italy. Well, because Rome and Greece were fighting each other. Rome wanted what Greece had, and Greece wanted to maintain what they had. And so he comes in and attacks southern Italy. He actually comes in with war elephants. Yeah. So up on the top, you can see a picture where somebody drew their idea of what those war elephants may have been like. Could you imagine? I've not seen that movie. So I could not imagine going out there, and this is, most cultures did not use horses for warfare. You are on foot. So I go out there, and I'm battling against some dude sitting up on an elephant. Or these elephants are charging at me. I'm taking off the other way. Well, Pyrrhus does this. He brings these ancient tanks, if you want to put them that way, and he comes in and he defeats the Romans twice in southern Italy. And it's looking not very good for Rome. So Pyrrhus retreats. He goes back to Greece. There were some troubles at home, and so he goes back across the Mediterranean, the Adriatic Sea, goes back home to Greece. While he is gone, his army is weakened. And while he is back in Greece, Rome comes in and they reconquer the rest of Italy. They defeat his army, and Pyrrhus has lost at this point.
Wait, did he know at this point?
Um,
Is he gonna come back and be like, what in the world?
I believe somebody would have sent word to him.
What if they got attacked?
Well, typically in ancient warfare, when the battle is going against you, you're going to send a messenger back to the homeland or back to the leader, and that messenger is going to go tell them, here's what's happening. We see that in the Old Testament. I'm struggling to remember the exact book. I want to say it's Kings or Chronicles, somewhere there, where they have a messenger that comes back to report to King Saul about battle, and then another messenger comes, and then another messenger, and it's bad news after bad news after bad news.
Why don't people just kill the messenger?
Haley, just a minute, hold on.
I think I heard it described when I did World History at Stanford, but
Okay.
didn't he like go like a long way around and lose a bunch of people and elephants?
Yes, and that's why I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There's more to this if we were going to go deeper into it. We just don't have the time to go into all of it. So if you think it's a cool story, which I do, I think it's a cool one, then I encourage you to look up some more on your own on that. What happens here in the final end to this is that Pyrrhus retreats back. He loses his elephants. Eventually, Rome and Greece come to peace. Rome allows all of their subjects to rule themselves and to live relatively peacefully as long as they don't rebel. And so most of Rome was pretty gracious when they defeated another group of people. They gave people rights of citizenship, sometimes even the right to vote. We talked about that. You have the right to vote doesn't mean you have the ability to. You might be so far away that you can't actually vote. But here's the condition. When Rome conquers your territory, you've got to send troops when we need them. So that's the loophole. That's the catch. That Rome will offer protection. They'll give you the privilege to vote, but you got to send troops should we need to go to war. So with Pyrrhus, he won 2 strategic battles in Rome. The reason why it's called a Pyrrhic victory is because although he won, he lost so many men and so many elephants and so much of his army that the cost did not live up to the victory. So he lost more than he gained when it was all said and done. It's kind of like on the athletic field. If you are, you're playing a soccer game and you're winning the game 5-0, and your top player is still in the game in the last 15 minutes and tears up his ankle or his knee. Okay, you beat him, you won the game, but you lost your top player for the rest of the season. So some people would call that a Pyrrhic victory because you lost your best player, even though, yes, you won the game. We got to give you credit for that, but it's going to be a rough road ahead, and that's kind of what it was for Greece and for Pyrrhus. This was ultimately the final nail in the coffin for Greece. That when Pyrrhus failed to retake Rome and retake southern Italy, it was like Greece kind of waved the white flag and said, all right, we're done. And Rome now becomes the main power in the world. So it now becomes a Roman see, and they now turn their attention here to Carthage.
Where's that?
So Carthage is in North Africa. So they're just across the Mediterranean. You can see up there in the top corner of my screen the light red, pinkish color. That is what is typically thought of as Carthage. Yep. And so begin to have some conflicts there with Carthage. Because Carthage had for a long time been a major trading source on the Mediterranean, and they had a rivalry with anybody else that wanted to trade in the Mediterranean, and Rome became a major rivalry. So while we find them there in North Africa, they begin to expand, and as Carthage expanded and Rome expanded, they ran into each other, and there was conflict. And both sides were jealous of one another, and they were afraid of each other. So both Rome and Carthage thought that we need to eliminate our enemy before our enemy eliminates us. And so they go to war.
Why don't they just become friends?
Because they both want to be the most powerful nation on the Mediterranean.
Why don't they do it together?
Because
Because,
there can only be one top dog.
Yeah,
So one
it's-
of them would betray the other at some point.
That's the point. You make them think you're friends.
Yeah, both of them knew that. Though.
Trojan war horse.
Like, okay, so no.
so, Rashad, are you driving yet? You driving? You taking driver's ed?
drive till like next year.
Again?
No.
Like,
Well, let's just say when you do get your driver's license,
there wouldn't be
did your sister
no-
drive yet?
Yeah, she has her permit.
So let's just say when you both have your driver's license, that your parents decide to buy you a car to share.
Ooh.
You do already? Okay, so how do you decide who gets the rights to drive it?
Well, I'm letting her drive it. Because I
Well,
don't-
but if you had your license,
I don't
how's that
like
going to work?
driving. I don't like it.
You don't like to drive?
No.
Oh, man.
Okay, if you did, yeah.
If
Imagine you did.
Okay.
love it.
Okay.
Okay. We'll fight over the radio. How about
If your
that?
mom
Or-
buys a book
or how
in your
about-
car and you can't share it.
You get one cell phone.
Okay. Then.
How do we decide that? I mean, you could share it.
You get it at night and I get it during the day.
Yeah, you can share it, but it's not going to work. It goes the same way here. Yes, in an ideal world, yes, we could say both sides could be content to divide the Mediterranean, and one you'll share the profits from it. But the profits that are coming from Asia that are sailing in the Mediterranean, once they get to this point, they got to decide: are we going north to Rome or are we going south to Carthage? They can't go both directions.
Make 2 trips. Send
Well,
me
it-
roads.
That's not the way the world works. This is not Amazon Prime.
And
Okay.
if we had an alliance,
Some of you just got that.
if we
Okay.
if we had an alliance over something like that, like, and one of us was going to betray the other at some point,
Mhm.
I wouldn't even wait for that. Like, why would you even get messed up in that? Just
Right.
say no and go to war in the first place.
And that's what happens here.
Because we don't want the young men to die.
So
They're gonna die.
they go to war, and the wars between Rome and Carthage are called the Punic Wars. Not because they were small and puny, but because that's what they are named. So they happened around 264. So again, our timeline, we put that in perspective. This is around the time that the plebeians are also given power to make laws for everybody. Rome's government is really starting to take shape, and they're becoming much stronger politically, which also means that they become stronger economically and also become stronger militarily here. So First Punic War comes out like this. There is a desire to control Sicily. So Sicily is right here on the southern tip of Italy, and both sides want it. It is a major trading position, and both nations want to go there. Carthage had the advantage with their ships, and Rome copied their design.
Oh.
They did. They took the patent, which patents didn't exist back then, but they took that idea, they copied it, and they built more ships. And they built their navy so that Rome had a better navy than Carthage, but there was a problem. Rome had trained its soldiers to fight on land. They had not been trained to fight on the sea. So you've got these people who are in these brand new state-of-the-art ships. They can't drive them. They can't sail them. And so their sailors were much more inferior to the Carthaginian sailors.
Well, why didn't they train them?
Well, they were in the process of it, but this is what Carthage does. Like, this is their strength, is the warfare on the ocean, on the seas. And it's going to take some time for Rome to learn the way to do it. Now, instead of learning how to drive these ships, and it was going to take some time, Rome decided they were going to create their own tactic. And so the Roman soldiers decided they were going to steer their ships into the side of the Carthage ships and just ram them.
Do they have a ram on it?
I think they had some kind of spear sticking out or something.
Why?
Because that was the best thing they knew how to do. They didn't
What about
know.
their lives?
They didn't know they
Naval
were
tactics.
Into the middle of the ship.
Well, if you take it head on and you run into the middle of the ship, then this one here ramming the side is going to be okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't get as much.
Yeah.
That's what you gotta do.
So you'd be fine.
Thank you, Asad.
Now, in addition to that, they came up with this other tactic where they would sail up right next to the ship, and as they would be side to side, they'd put a plank across from the edge of my ship, from the wall of my ship to your ship, and we'd run across into your ship. And in hand-to-hand combat, nobody could beat the Romans. So when they got on board the ship with the Carthaginian sailors, it was no contest at that point.
That's where pirates got their idea.
It may have been,
It
yes.
sounds like
It does sound like that. Very good. So,
I mean, pirates use ropes.
in the results, the final result of this, Carthage acknowledges their weakness, and Carthage settles for peace. They don't technically surrender, but they say, let's stop all this, and we will pay for all of your damages to Rome. So Carthage volunteers. That's part of their agreement to stop fighting, and they're going to pay for all the damages. Chance, you have a question?
Oh, I was just having an idea.
Okay.
What if they like? 'Cause these ships have like the oars on like the sides, right? People like below deck rowing, right?
There would have been some of those, yes.
Okay, so why did they like just like get like full speed and like go like right along and like break all the oars so then like they can't really move?
Yeah, they did some of that too. Yeah, that's a good idea. So we get to war number 2. And in this particular war, Carthage goes after Spain. When it did not work to go up to Sicily, they go towards Spain. Spain is under Roman control, and they are an ally of Rome. You are correct. So you are going to awaken the beast once again, and you are going to get Rome pretty upset. And so Rome decided that they were going to send one army here to Spain and a second army to Carthage. And now Carthage is going to have to make a decision. Are they going to continue their attack in Spain, or are they going to return home and defend their homeland?
They sent them at the same time.
Pretty close, yeah.
That might
So, yeah.
be awesome.
So they
Not for Carthage.
they send these two armies there, and they want to keep Carthage divided. Well, Carthage had this guy by the name of Hannibal. Hannibal. His name is Hannibal. And he was the commander of the army of Carthage. And a lot of historians have compared him to Alexander the Great. He is a military genius, but there's probably a reason you've never heard of him. Because he died, and he was not as successful as that Alexander the Great. However, his military tactics and his skill was very similar to Alexander. And so he planned to attack Rome. Okay, so Rome sends half of its army to Spain, half its army to Carthage. Hannibal says, okay, nobody's there to protect Rome. I'm going to go there.
Where's Hannibal from again?
Hannibal's from Carthage. And so he decides to allow Carthage to continue to be attacked, to allow part of his army here in Spain to be under attack. And he says, I'm going to go here to Rome, and I'm going to attack Rome. It's a pretty gutsy move. And he moved his army through the Alps, and he surprised the Romans. They had no idea that they were coming, and so they get caught up here in Switzerland, up in the Alps, and they continue fighting for 15 years.
Oh my goodness.
And they live off the land there, and this battle goes on. Now, it's on and off, but this continues on for 15 years.
It just seems predictable that you
Wait.
would go
That's our whole life.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Why wouldn't you leave some of your army to attack them?
Well, there were some there still to defend, yes. And there were still some here. But
Okay.
they kind of get stalled out. They can't make more progress, and Rome defends their territory, but Hannibal continues pushing on. And keep in mind, again, this is a different time where Transportation is not as easy as it is today.
Oh, man.
Okay? So, we get to the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal is outnumbered 2-1, and it does not look good. And so he decided that he was going to retreat his army. And he retreats his army in a bulge or balloon shape, where he keeps some of his soldiers on an outer flank on the outside, and it forms kind of this half circle. And the inside, the middle section, makes it look like they're retreating back. Well, it's all a battle tactic. And so Rome attacks the retreating soldiers in the middle, and they come in, and as they continue to retreat, they invite those soldiers to come in to attack them, and they move. Carthage moves into a U shape surrounding the Roman soldiers. And they end up taking those outer flanks and encircling the Roman army. Even though they're outnumbered 2-1, they took the few soldiers they had and they were able to completely surround the Roman army. When it's all said and done, Hannibal loses 6,000 of his men in the Battle of Cannae. Rome lost 60,000
Oh dang.
soldiers in this battle.
We're on the outside.
What?
All they had to do is circle.
So Rome makes that massive mistake in the Battle of Cannae, and this is part of the reason why Hannibal's considered at such a high level as what he is. But it doesn't all end well and good for Hannibal. Otherwise, you probably would have heard of him before. So we have a man by the name of Scipio, and this is the turning point of the war, the Battle of Zama. Scipio is a Roman commander. And while the battle is happening up here in the Alps in northern Rome, Scipio decides he's going to make this extra attack in Carthage. And so he musters as many soldiers as he can out of Rome. He goes to attack Carthage, and word comes back to Hannibal, says, if you don't come back now, you're going to have nothing left when you return. And so that forces Hannibal to give up here in northern Rome, northern Italy, and go back to Carthage to defend his homeland.
And the Romans should have followed and done us a break.
And at the Battle of Zama, Carthage is defeated again. Carthage loses.
Like Bill loses?
Not quite. Not all of their soldiers. Hannibal may have died in that battle. I don't have that in my notes. I don't remember which battle it was that he died in.
Can I look up when he died?
Sure. Yeah, if you find that out, let me know.
Can I look it up now?
Yeah, go for it. So at the end of this particular battle, Carthage gives up a lot again. Carthage gives up all of their territory outside of Africa. They lose anything that they gained in Spain, in Rome, in any other part of Europe. They lose all their territory, and Rome now controls all of it.
And if they hadn't gone to battle, would they have been able to keep all of that?
Probably. But at some point, it would have come to a battle somewhere. Yeah. It's just a matter of Rome was stronger, Rome was smarter, and Rome took control. Carthage was forced to reduce their navy to only 10 ships. You can't do hardly anything with 10 ships. You can't hardly even defend yourself. They also had to pay war damages, and it's at this point here after the Battle of Zama that Rome is the master of the Mediterranean. Nobody else can even touch Rome when it comes to control of the Mediterranean.
Who killed Roman?
How did Rome lose control?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when we get to the end of the Roman Empire, when we see when it falls. We'll talk about how that happens. Yeah,
America came in next.
yeah.
Actually, kind of gives him sympathy for him. He just fought and then lost again. Pretty much lost everything.
You die in battle, or you die in? Does it say how he died?
I looked. It didn't say anything about dying in battle.
didn't know.
Okay. Okay.
He just failed.
No, it said he got like the fever or something
But
like that.
Lord,
and it kinda
none of
spread
life.
a bit towards the end.
Okay.
Dang.
Now, after the Second Punic War, Carthage is nowhere near the power that they once were, but they do muster up enough energy for one more war.
Why?
So, well, it's not entirely Carthage's fault, and I'll explain why. I think Carthage would have been content to leave Rome alone at this point. I think they had kind of learned their lesson. But Rome was afraid of Carthage renewing their power and coming back and attacking again. There was a senator in Rome by the name of Cato. And Cato ended every speech that he made on the Senate floor with this phrase: "But I declare that Carthage must be destroyed." It did not matter what his speech was about. It could have been about taxes. He would end it with, "But I declare that Carthage must be destroyed." He could have been taking lunch orders and said, "I declare that Carthage must be destroyed."
Well, that's one way.
He wanted everybody to know Carthage had to be destroyed. And so Carthage allegedly broke one of the provisions of the peace. And so that gave Rome the authority, or gave them what they thought is the excuse to go in and to attack Carthage once again. And I believe that Cato was probably the one spearheading this and would have fully supported a declaration of war on Carthage. So Rome goes to Carthage and they say, "Hey, Carthage, we want you to move 10 miles inland, 10 miles away from the Mediterranean." Well, what was Carthage's main source of income?
Water.
Trade on the Mediterranean. Can you trade if you're 10 miles off the coast?
Yes, but not using
Not easily.
Okay, yes, but not very easily, because you're not going to have direct access. So this is essentially a death sentence for the people of Carthage. You're not going to have an economy. You're not going to have a way to buy and sell goods anymore. And Carthage says, we can't do that. And so Rome says, okay, if you're not willing to do it, we're going to come attack you. And so Rome attacks and completely destroys everything. And everything is carried off, hauled away, totally flattened.
Wait, Carthage is?
In Carthage's. Yeah.
What happened to all the people? Did they kill them?
They took the people and they sold them as slaves. Yes?
There,
So
sure.
was Carthage like the one group of people they didn't actually join their system?
True, yes. They did not let them join because they didn't trust the people of Carthage. And Carthage had already shown that they were going to fight back. And that was one of Rome's things. If you will follow our rules and if you will be peaceable, then we'll treat you nice. If not, we're going to wipe you off the face of the earth.
They kept their promise.
Why did they ask them to move inland? Like, why?
Okay, so they asked them to move inland because they broke a provision of peace. So they said, as a penalty for that, you need to move inland. Which,
So that you'll all die.
well, they were competing partners for trade on the Mediterranean.
Right, but
So-
Rome could have lived without that, and they could, like, if they moved 10 miles inland, they would not have their.
Well, for
they would
now,
lose their livelihood.
but what about 10 years later when Carthage rebuilds? So it'd be like you and I both have a coffee shop right across the street from each other, and my coffee's better, but you're still there, you're taking customers away from me.
So tell them to move 10 miles
So-
from the road.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, you got to move 10 miles away from the interstate, and you got to move way in town, nobody's going to find you. Your business is going to not survive very long. So, yeah, it's not fair to Carthage. It's not fair at all. And you kind of feel bad for them, but that's the way that the Roman Empire grew. And that's part of the way they built themselves. And bottom line, if we can understand this concept as we finish today, if we can understand that Rome was nice when you agreed to their demands. If you didn't, you met the fate of Carthage.
Whoa.
Now, we'll jump ahead. We're going to talk about the life of Christ as we go along a little bit later in the